Hello everyone. I thought I would talk a little bit about frayed edges today. I've had some questions about frayed edges, and I thought I would just share some information. Sorry, I realized after turning on the camera that my space is kind of dirty. That's just got strings. This is where I sew also, so there's always a lot of strings out here. And I just thought I would share what little bit of knowledge I know about frayed edges. And also, I love the look of frayed edges. I love the rustic quality of it. I'm not a nice, neat, put together kind of person, I guess you could say. And so frayed edges what was I going to say? Not compliment. They make sense with my personality. Let's just put it like that. Simple. Before I do anything else, I just want to talk about fabric. I think most all of us know fabric is strings running in two different directions, woven together. So, and I thought I'd show you on this burlap because it's easy to see the strings. So you have strings running this direction and strings running this way, threads. So when you cut the edge, like over here, for instance, this is starting to come off because there's nothing holding these threads in anymore. So they easily just pull off. And this edge is what gives you that frayed look. So that's a very simplified, most everyone knows that. But not everyone's worked with fabric. This is mainly for newbies, people who have not worked with fabric before. Now, in a recent comment, someone asked me how I frayed canvas to look the way it did, and I mentioned squaring up fabric. Now, not everyone knows what that means. Squaring up fabric is when you cut an edge and then you intentionally pull the threads to find a square, to square your fabric with the weave. Like for instance on this canvas right here. This edge right here has been cut and then pulled to find the squared edge. It's square. This side over here, on the other hand, is not. When you pull this, it doesn't go all the way across, and you can tell that it's been cut at an angle because these threads here are shorter and they're coming out, and they get longer as you go because the line is going at an angle. Now, when you have a piece of fabric that is not square, then your fringe or your frayed edge looks, it does not look as square. It doesn't look as nice and neat. It's crooked. It's just other things happen. Like for instance, if I were to continue to pull these, eventually they would get to the point where these threads are long enough that they stop it from wanting to fray. They get tangled, and then so the more I pull this, the more I can see where my squared fabric is. So if I wanted to use this, I could just trim this fringe off square with the fabric. So that's what I meant by squaring up your fabric. Now, many people, before they start to sew, like quilters, I know for sure, they square up their fabric before they sew it. Or many of them do anyways, some that I've talked to. So that's how you know that when you stitch something, your fabric's going to be square. And that helps if you want to do frayed edges. Now, I don't always get mine perfectly square. I try to square it up. But some fabric, like canvas and burlap and most cotton fabrics, are pretty easy to square up. Like this one, you can see has a nice clean edge to it. And it has a nice fringe. Other fabrics like tapestries and what am I trying to think? Like damask, tapestries, Knitted fabric obviously is completely different because the threads actually loop around each other. They aren't just woven. So it works best with woven fabrics. Tapestries are woven, but there's more than one layer of threads that is woven. So I just got this out to show this is my everyday carry that I've been using since September of last year. So almost a year, about 10 months. And it stays in my purse. It's in and out nearly every day. And this frayed edge has just gotten prettier, in my opinion. It does occasionally have strings that come loose, and all I do is I just pull them till they stop and trim them. Every once in a while they start to get on my nerves, and I just give my journal or notebook, or this is a traveler's notebook, it's my wallet, and I just trim it. Now, because it's stitched, I hope this is making sense. I feel like I'm kind of all over the place, but because it's stitched all the way around, I know that when I pull those threads, they're gonna stop and not continue to unravel because it's stitched along this edge. It will only fray to the stitched edge. So, like for instance, right here, I have this fabric. Hopefully you can see that, well, yeah, it's stitched white. I think you can see that pretty clearly. There's a line of stitching right there. So if I continue to pull these threads, I had this fabric for another project that I didn't end up using it for. I found it in my stash. Now this is a cotton fabric, so it's a little bit harder to find the threads than with the canvas. Canvas is like the best thing in the world to work with. Another thing that also slows down the fraying is, like I said, when the threads going this direction, the threads going opposite of your stitch will begin to tangle up, thus preventing the threads going with the stitch from coming out, which is a plus to an extent. Now, I could continue to pull these if I wanted to until I got to this stitched line. Once I got to that stitched line, I wouldn't be able to anymore. They would stop. I guess a simple way to show that would be to maybe, I'm trying to think. I'm going to run this through my sewing machine. Before I do that, I have to change my thread because I have a light colored in there. I'm going to just put some black, which I was going to do this before I started running. I'm going to run some black thread into my sewing machine. And I know this part is off camera. I apologize for that. But I didn't really have a way to set up my camera so that I could easily show you what I was talking about and show you what I was doing at the same time. I got to figure out a way to do that. It's my area is kind of funny. Give me 1 second here. I know you're just looking at an empty screen right now. Okay, I'm going to just run a stitch, a straight stitch, along this edge of this canvas. Okay, now it's easier to see this time. So when I pull these threads out, they come out real easy up until they get to that area right there, and then they stop. See, like that one right there, it's caught on a stitch. So instead of just yanking it, I'm going to just trim it, and then that thread that was going this direction now blends in with the threads going the opposite direction. I hope that makes sense. And now once this is sewn, and if it's sewn all the way around specifically, and it is maybe sewn to another piece of fabric, or it's sewn onto a book page, it will no longer, my sewing machine's doing something funny, the light was flashing. the threads will no longer pull. See, they just stop. They get stuck on the threads. Now, the same would go if I were to take a piece of fabric like this. If I don't sew on there, but I only sew on the sides, let's do that. Give me a second. I hope this isn't too terribly long and boring and is actually beneficial to someone. I hope. If not, then I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. But I think that for some people this will be helpful. I'm going to trim this. I'm just going to chop up a bunch of fabric today. Okay, so I've left this open, but I've stitched on the sides. Sometimes with pockets I do that. I don't stitch along the top. It's just prerogative. There's no particular reason why I do or don't do it. Usually I only do that if I want to decorate it with some trim or something like that. So you can see there are, hopefully see that there are threads on there that are loose, and I can pull those. Until I got to the stitch. So, see, it stops. Then I can no longer, and this edge right here stops. So all I have to do is trim that one that came loose, or the two that came loose, and I have a secure, stitched, yet frayed edge piece of fabric that could be a pocket or tuck spot or what have you. Now, I would only do this inside a book, because if it were on the outside of a book, this could catch on things, and then you would get just some annoying strings like that would interfere with probably the use of your book. But inside a book, it's very unlikely that it would get caught on something. And it does not, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't weaken the fabric. The fabric is still just as strong. It's not gonna rip or tear easier because it's not stitched. It just simply keeps, it just simply frays more. Stitching prevents continual fraying, because if you just take this and you didn't stitch it, it would just fray until probably it was about to the middle, and then these threads would eventually prevent it from fraying more. But yeah, I hope that's helpful. And like I said on my last video that I did, I had the tapestry journals, and they were still they're new, so they're still fraying quite nicely. And it's as simple as just taking the thread, pulling it gently until it stops on its own, and trim it. And then after a while, you get a beautifully frayed fringe on the edge of your book. And it does not interfere with the integrity of the book. That's what I was trying to think of earlier, integrity. The integrity of the book, of the fabric, is still intact, and it just has a frayed edge instead of a nice, neat, folded, hemmed edge. Hem has its purpose in a lot of places. I wouldn't want all of my clothes to have frayed edges. I do have some that I'm okay with. They're intentionally that way. But hemming has its purpose and its place. In my junk journals, I don't feel that it's necessary. I like and prefer the frayed edge. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. I hope that helped some people somewhere a little bit, mainly those who are new to working with fabric, help you to know how to square up your fabric, and you can help along a fringe, a frayed edge, if you want that look. So yeah, and how to prevent it from fraying more. So let me know if that was helpful. Give a thumbs up if you enjoyed this type of video, and I may do others, just some hints and tips, I suppose, for newbies. So thanks for watching, guys. Bye.